from the Salvation Army National Headquarters, this is the Fight for Good podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fight for Good podcast. We thank you for listening. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Foley. We're broadcasting again from our temporary studio, also known as Elizabeth's office. Elizabeth is our producer. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello.
And to my left is a gentleman whose voice and beauty matches radio, podcasting, television as well. Mr. Jeff McDonald.
What a grand entrance that gives me. Thank you very much.
Great
to be with you as usual.
It is super fantastic and fun to be with you. And you're doing an excellent job with some of your interviews that you're doing. And so this one, we're focusing on the wonderful book that came out for the holiday season on Advent, and that is entitled Christmas Breakthrough with our author, Commissioner Phil Needham. You had the opportunity to talk with him a little bit about this book. This book covers not only the Advent season, Christmas Day, but Epiphany as well. And throughout the inspirational text, Commissioner Needham retells the events that are surrounding the birth of Christ and shares many lessons that can be learned in revisiting what he recognizes the most important breakthrough in human history. So we've been working on this book for a little while. This manuscript's been in our process here, and there's been a lot of editing that's been going on, a lot of self-editing. Commissioner's done. He's brilliant with his things. What are some of your takeaways of the conversation that you had with him recently?
Yeah, it was really a good conversation. It's easy to gloss over the meaning of Christmas during the holiday season, but when you read this book, you realize the depth of meaning and significance in every aspect of what we know as the Christmas story, the incarnation of Christ. And I think Commissioner Needham really delves deeply into that, not only looking beneath the surface of our obvious materialism that dominates the season, but also addressing matters of the heart through that story in daily devotionals for every day. As you said, that leads right through Christmas and up to Epiphany.
I know that this is a unique book for us because we haven't produced this kind of book in the past, specifically for the Advent season, or have we?
It's unique.
Yeah,
you're right. And of course, it's a perennial. And it's good for Bible study, individual study as well. But it could be certainly a catalyst for group discussion. He
was very passionate of and pushing us to make sure we got this book in the hands of officers throughout the United States before the Advent season came. I think we were able to do that, but I'm not quite sure how much of it has been able to be digested. And we're going to continue to encourage. And as you said, it will be a perennial. This will be a book that we'll probably be promoting in the next few years because it works off the Advent calendar, not necessarily the Roman calendar. And I think he's put a lot of work in the detail and making it relevant, making it real, and making it come alive in the hearts of the readers.
He has, and the point of the book is that he wants to use the Christmas story for people to look forward into their future and prepare for better days for themselves and to grow as people.
So here's Jeff's interview with Commissioner Phil Needham.
Now, this Christmas Breakthrough book is quite compelling. It's 205 pages of daily meditations on Advent through Christmas and up to Epiphany, and including the introduction to Epiphany, and prepares readers for the new year. It is certainly good for Salvation Army officers and personnel to keep their spiritual focus, they can use this as a tool to do so. But also, this book is really impactful for the general reader as well. It's very reader friendly, and the author, you managed to mine so many insights from the account of Christ's birth that apply today, and we're just excited to be able to speak with you today about a few of those insights that I picked up in reading the book. And by the way, the book is available at christianbook.com online and through Salvation Army supplies and purchasing departments. So if you could tell us, Phil, first, what led you to write the book?
Well, I've always considered the Advent Christmas season to be extremely important spiritually for myself, and I found that to be an important time when we were Corps officers with our Corps. And of course, Christmas is such a peak celebration in the life of the church, and I've come to see how important it is to prepare ourselves for it rather than going through these busy days in December, in the latter part of November, when we're just overwhelmed with pressure to buy this, buy that, go to this party, go to that party. And of course, many of us in the Salvation Army are involved in the intense fundraising, which we need to do to provide funds for our services during that time. So it is just extremely important for any Christian to be able to, in the midst of all of that busyness and pressure, to take time to reflect on what this is all about. Now, what Advent means is literally coming, the coming. And we think of it in two dimensions. First of all, we involve ourselves once again in what led up to the coming of Christ, the situation of the human race, if you like, before that time. And so during Advent, in preparation for Christ, we confess our sins. We look at ourselves in an honest way and seek how we can put ourselves in a better position spiritually to receive the Christ. And that makes the Christmas celebration, when I say Christmas celebration, I mean Christmas Day and the 12 days of Christmas, because that is part of the Christmas journey leading up to Epiphany, the celebration of the coming of the Magi, which represents the presentation of the gospel to the whole world, to the Gentile world, as well as to the Jewish world. We also think of Advent in another dimension, because Christians look forward to the second coming of Christ. Mm-hmm. And that is an important dimension of Advent as well. How do we as Christians in our day prepare for Christ's coming? There are some Christians who usually go by the name of Adventists who feel that it's going to happen very soon. We don't know when it's going to happen. Jesus said he didn't know either, only the Father. So we live every day as if that could be the day. We don't postpone it, or we don't arbitrarily say it's going to be this particular date. We live every day of our lives in the light of his coming, as if we live that day with the sunrise representing the coming of Christ that day, as if Christ were really coming. So that presents a huge challenge for us, not in the sense of a burden, but rather an opportunity to live in the sometimes crazy way of the Christian life, where we don't let ourselves be oppressed by a lot of the normalcies which are contrary to Christian living, contrary to a lot of the motivations we see in the world today, self-serving motivations, things like that. We can disengage ourselves from that and live as Christ came to make it possible for us to live. That's the real gift of the season.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I should interject that another aspect of this book that we're excited about is that you are actually recording this book for audio release. Is that correct?
Yes. It's not complete yet, so probably won't be released till next year, I think, moving toward Christmas time.
Right. But our listeners can detect that you certainly have a good voice as a narrator. So I think that'll be a really attractive feature for this book. As you well know, Salvation Army officers and personnel are extremely busy at this time of year, serving human need, manning kettles, collecting funds and distributing goods and services to those in need. The Army, of course, is known as putting faith in action. At the same time, I think you are providing this book as a way to solidify or help Salvation Army officers as well as the general public rekindle or keep the spirit of Christmas alive. Can you speak something about the meaning of Christmas, the meaning of Advent in light of that?
Yes, I think if we're observing Advent in a meaningful way, we're spending some time alone with God. Or maybe we're spending time with your family or with a spouse and reading the prophecies, reading the story, and applying it to ourselves. So I think that as we do that, we begin to get closer to the God whom the story is all about. We begin to prepare ourselves to receive Him. We create in that time alone with God a connectedness that makes our activism even more meaningful or deeply meaningful, because it's so easy during the Christmas season to just be activists, just to wear ourselves out, doing good, to be sure, raising money to enable us to serve the poor and the marginalized. It's extremely important. But I think we're in the best position to do that and to make that, even raising money, a spiritual ministry, if we spend this time in contemplation and in prayer with God. And as I think I've said before, I think the best contemplatives are the best activists, and the best activists are the best contemplatives. So don't rob your activism and your ministry out there in the world of the depth of understanding and the deep presence of God that makes that really meaningful.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I guess when you think about it, to have God and our relationship with Christ involved in our activities and coming alongside of us gives us the real power that we alone by ourselves really don't have.
Exactly.
Yeah. You write. I'm going to read a quote from the book. You write that thinking about loss seems to go against the spirit of the season. How have our modern observances of the season diminished the meaning of Advent?
Because our observance of the season is be happy, happy, happy. Do things that elicit joy. Do things that make you feel high. I'm not talking necessarily about alcohol and drugs, but I'm talking about just fun parties over and over and over. Also seeking the false sources of joy, which is in material acquisition, buying presents and feeling a sense of worth or not feeling a sense of worth based on the presents you get or don't get. All of that sort of distracts from the fact that this Christ came into the world to die, to die for us, to pay the price of our sins, to give His life in an agonizing death so that we could have life in all its fullness. So the death that was implicit in Jesus' birth, a death which His disciples found it hard to, in a sense, we're like those disciples. We don't want to hear the tough stuff or the news of death. We want to just experience and hear and talk about and party about life. But death is the termination of our earthly journey, and we don't know when it's coming. And so if we live in awareness of our death, that enables us to live each day with very deep joy, just for the gift of this day. Just this day. I can live this day, and that brings me great joy. It's a privilege to do that. And if we're always postponing death and not thinking about it, then we, I think, postpone living. That may sound rather counterintuitive, but if you postpone your death, you postpone your living, because you think, I've always got another day to get it right,
Yeah. So what you're saying brings me to another quote from your book, which I think really brings home a lot of the detail that you cover in your book, uncovering spiritual truths for people to live by. You write, "We can live the life the adult Jesus actually taught us to live in the Gospels, giving us a vantage point better to recognize his presence in our world." So I suspect that is kind of your motivation for sharing your thoughts in this book.
Yes, it is. And yes, and actually, I wrote a book about that. Not published by the Salvation Army, published by WIFP, WIFP, and Stock. It's called "Following Rabbi Jesus: The Christian Forgotten Calling." And what I do in that book is I read through the Gospels over and over, and I noted everything Jesus said about how we need to live his life, because he came as a rabbi. And a rabbi back then was someone who gathered disciples around him and taught them a way of life, and they were to imitate they would imitate his life and obey what he said. And we sometimes forget that dimension. We put aside the Gospels and say those are children's stories and all that, and we want to get into the theology of Paul and that kind of stuff, which is good stuff. But the foundation are the four Gospels. That's where Jesus taught us how to live this life, and he called us to be his imitators. That's the whole rabbi discipleship relationship. So we there's no realization of the full Christian life without imitating Jesus, and by the strength and power and influence of the Holy Spirit, we can actually do that in a fairly credible way.
Yeah. The themes of waiting, preparing for change, and looking forward run through your meditations in Christmas Breakthrough. How does your book help readers prepare for the new year?
It's a good question. I would hope that, first of all, by the time they get to Christmas, they have dealt with some things in their lives, which is the whole purpose of the Advent season, things in their lives that stand in the way of living for Christ. And then having gone through the 12 days of Christmas, as we looked at different aspects of what it means to live in the dawn, if you like, living in the brightness, what does it mean to live in the brightness, the dawn? What does it mean to live with a larger family than just your small family? What does it mean to be an inclusive family? What does it mean to live in the light of presence with the person next door or down the street? What does it mean to live in the presence of Christ everywhere? I like the General Paul Rader used to say, probably still does, if you're a Christian, you're a world Christian. The world is on your heart. You see yourself as a citizen of this world God made, and so you share your compassion with those in other parts of the world, especially where people are suffering, or Christians are suffering, or anyone's suffering. And then living inclusively. How inclusive is your personal life? When you go to church, what do you do? Sit with your friends, or sit with just your family, and there are the other groups over there, maybe a different ethnicity. How much do you interact with them? Our core, our Atlanta Temple core, is over the recent years has become a multicultural core, And the challenge for us is to go over and talk to that family or that person who maybe doesn't speak your language that well, and is different from you in a lot of ways. But how do you live that inclusivity, which was so essential to Christ and the way He lived? How do you live the beautiful life, the holy life? How do you live gratefully, with gratitude? And that, of course, comes on New Year's Eve. And how do you live now in the hope? In the hope, that's New Year's Day, and then all the things it means: living above fear, living blended lives, living without illusion, living in the surprises of God, and then living brightly in the darkness. All this, I think, prepares you for a new year, rather than just making a bunch of New Year's resolutions that you came up with the night before. You've got something concrete here to lead you and inform you and motivate you to live a better Christian life in the coming year. That's the hope.
Well, we thank Commissioner Phil Needham for taking a few moments to spend some time with Jeff, and certainly in producing another what we think is an excellent production in our long litany of great books that we have at Crest Books. If you're interested in any of our other books, please make sure you go to salvationarmy.christianbook.com. You'll just find a lot of great things there, and they're available. And we'll be announcing through our social media feeds and also in the War Cry when the ebook is ready for this and others. So that's an exciting thing that you can look forward to happening on a regular basis in the new year of 2020 and as we go forward. Well, that's going to end this episode of the Fight for Good podcast. We really want to thank you for taking a few moments and giving us a listen. We want to encourage you to subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to follow The War Cry and Peer Magazine on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and at Pinterest. Well, until next time, this has been the Fight for Good podcast. We wish you the most holy and Merry Christmas season. God bless you.
Subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts.